So welcome to another workshop offered by the University of Kentucky. We are thrilled to have three wonderful panelists and UK leaders to talk us through how they support their employees and themselves on their journey for work-life management. So here's a couple of objectives for today. They're very simple and straightforward. Our goal here today is to hear insights from our UK leaders about how they support work life for themselves and their teams. Our other objective is to offer examples and possibly some ideas to leaders and employees on their journeys to support their teams and themselves. So here's a few things to remember as we go through our time today. One, keep in mind that each comment is the opinion of the speaker. Our leaders here today, our three leaders, are not speaking for every leader at the university. Also keep in mind that this is an opportunity for you to ask questions and share some examples and maybe get some ideas as you are managing your work and life responsibilities. Each employee has to determine how they approach work-life management because we know everyone is different. What works for one person may not work for another. So we encourage you definitely not to fall into the comparison trap there, but use this time to get some ideas. Also keep in mind this is a journey. Like work-life management, it is a journey, it is a process, and our needs change from time to time. It changes with the different seasons and stages of our life and our career. Also, each employee must actively create a plan with their leaders that will work for them. And once you've created that plan, guess what? You have to revise it. And as always, be respectful. So let's kick us off just thinking about work-life management and balance and how we know that is sometimes we don't like the word balance sometimes, but it is something that we are all trying to do. And when we say balance here, we're not saying that everything has equal weights. We're just saying that you are figuring out what works for you. So these couple of cartoons, I just recently discovered them and they've become two of my favorite cartoons to share because they really do, in my opinion, send a really great message and a reminder of how we are all kind of trying to do our best when it comes to work-life management. And you see this one cartoon talks about expectations and reality. So our expectations is that we are happy and going along and this guy's smiling and looking like really happy, and on the work side of things are working. On the life side of things, there's all these great things that they're working on and it's all going well. And then you have the reality. The reality shows a picture of sometimes when we are trying to manage things, we find that there's all kinds of challenges. It could be at work, and on the life side, you see this person, they had to let go of a lot of things, and the best they can do seems to be sleep. So sometimes in work-life management, we know we have different seasons and different times where we feel like, I really want it to be this way, but I feel like it's this way. This other picture tells us when I try to work, sometimes life interrupts. And this is truly an example of how oftentimes many of us feel. You may feel like I'm really trying to get things done and trying to stay focused, but you have things going on in your life that maybe may need your attention. And that is completely normal, and we have to address them. So let me go ahead and introduce our panelists. And then after I do the introduction, we are going to have them answer our initial 3 basic questions, and then we will take questions from the chat and questions that were submitted in advance. So we have with us today Dean Jennifer Greer, who is the Dean of the College of Communication and Information. We also have Associate Dean, Chief Operating Officer, and Professor, Dr. Craig Martin, and he's with the College of Pharmacy. And then we have Assistant Dean Meg Marquis, who is the Assistant Dean for Undergraduate Affairs at the Gatton College of Business and Economics. So in order to give us a little time to get to know our panelists and kind of their approach to work life, here's the 3 questions that they're going to start out answering for us. The first question, what is your approach to work-life management? How do you support your teams and yourself? Second question, What type of work-life related requests do you usually receive? And our third question, how do you manage your own work-life efforts? To kick us off in this session, we're going to start with Dean Greer.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here with you all today. I'm glad that I was asked to do this. I will start with the disclaimer that I'm probably not great at all of these approaches, but I try. So, and I think that's probably what we all have in common on this call, is that this is something we care about, and we're constantly trying to adjust and learn and figure out how to be a good supervisor, how to be, a good person to have that balance ourselves, and how to support our teams in that balance. So I like the order of these questions. I think these are wonderful. If we start with the global, from a supervisory role, what do we do in our own workplaces as supervisors to try to support our teams, kind of some specifics about those in our workplaces, and then moving to the personal. So I'll kind of start from the global end, and I will note that I have several members of our team here on this call. We've got our HR specialist, our chief financial officer is here, and our chief of staff, and they are all very active partners in the efforts that we make in the college to try to support this work-life balance to all of our faculty and staff, graduate students, anybody that's honestly on the payroll, our student workers as well. And so the first question, I think, when you are a new supervisor or come into a new supervisory role, is let's look at the structure. And the structure is, in my opinion, the founding building block through which we ask these questions on work-life management. And so one of the things that I've done since I've come in the college, and I was joined with Tina Nalvis, and I both came in at the same time, it was to look at how was our college structured. Was there backup for people? So when they go out on parental leave, are they sick? Are they want to take a vacation? Do they feel like everything's going to ground to a halt, or they can't relax because when they come back, there's going to be all these problems, or they have to check their email constantly? And so even just looking at the structure within your area is, who is the backup? How do we share responsibilities? How do we share duties so people don't feel like they always have to be on? And this is from every level, whether it's, a beginning staff role to our associate deans, faculty staff, where is the backup for them? And so we've been really intentional about trying to create a team's approach in our college within each unit, that everybody's got a backup for something. So if somebody wants to go to Italy for 2 weeks, that's a wonderful thing. How do we make sure that they do not have to check their email? They don't have to worry about, oh, is this event going to get taken care of? Because there's somebody else that can take that. And I think when I came into the college, and I've come into other places, there has not been that backup. And that's when we see our employees really stressed out and not being able to separate. So that was kind of the first thing that we did in trying to look at the structure. That said, I was just talking to Craig right before this, and he was explaining his role in the College of Pharmacy, and I don't think I have structured the dean's role personally in a way that allows me to accomplish that. I think we've concentrated on, the units within the college, but I have 14 or 15 direct reports, depending on how you count them. And that's too many for someone to manage effectively, quite frankly. And so, it's a do what I say and not what I do type approach, I would say. We've done a lot of things. I think Heidi Metzger and Megan Sizemore, who are both on this call, do things to support from the HR and the chief of staff role in our college. We have a staff assembly that works with professional development, and they have requested programming like this, and we've brought in outside experts to do events just for our college. We've promoted things that UK Benefits and the UK Central does for our college. And then when we have interventions, if there is a problem that is bubbling up around the work-life balance, that, somebody's supervisor may not be respecting the boundaries of the hours that they work, and they are, a non-exempt position, right? That is a really important thing that we are going to have to address with the supervisor, that sometimes is a faculty member and may not have had the supervisory training that our staff members have, quite frankly. How do we approach that? What's the team effort? How do we make sure that the faculty supervisor understands the roles of somebody who's in an exempt or a non-exempt staff position, right? Those are different roles at a complex organization like us, and that we all may not have the same starting point or expectations. So getting the right voices in the room, feeling like people have support so that they know where to go to, so that we can work through a process. The work-life related requests that we usually receive in the college, and these typically will go to our chief of staff, Megan Sizemore, and our HR official, Heidi Metzger. They are a lot of things around, FML or TDL for our faculty. Faculty are a unique type of employee, and that they do not, our 9-month faculty do not earn sick or vacation leave because they're on a different type of contract. And so they often don't even know what is available to them. And I think the biggest thing that we try to do is say, hey, we've heard about this life event. Did you know you are entitled to 1, 2, 3, and 4? A lot of times they don't. And we can try to tell them every which way, but until it happens to them, they don't pay attention because they're like, oh, I'm not going to need that, or that doesn't apply to me. So it's this constant communication among this team. Oh, I heard from somebody here, and then, okay, let's get either, Heidi or Megan to reach out to the faculty member or the staff member to say, hey, did you know that you are entitled to FML, TDL, that we can take care of that. You can have modified duties, you have the parental leave, and even if you're not entitled to the FML, that you can have the approved parental leave. That typically most of ours are around the work schedules, as you said here, that flexible work schedules. And I know we're still kind of working through those guidelines from the university, but finding clarity around that. But ensuring that if you've got flexible work schedules or some remote work options in there, that the employees feel like they have the support to that we're counseling them around what a work from home situation is like. If you have elder care going on in your home, or you have children in your home, it is really hard to get your work done, right? And so how do we make sure that we respect that employees' wishes, but make sure they're set up for success in a flexible work schedule or a work from home operation? And those are a lot of, there's not a one size fits all, and it's a lot of asking questions and listening and trying to make sure that we have that information. The last one I will do, and then I'll turn it over to Craig, I believe is the next panelist. How do I manage my own work-life efforts? I will say I'm not great at that. I'm better than I used to be. I believe my daughter, who also works at the University of Kentucky, is on this call, and we have the little tracking family app where we can kind of figure out where people are. When it's 9 o'clock at night and she sees I'm still sitting in my office, she will text me and say, Mom, you need to come home. You have worked enough. Get out of your office and come home. And, kind of having that little check that I've got an adult daughter who also is dealing with work-life balance right now, who is a check on me, is incredibly helpful. I will tell you the one thing that I have found, it was during the pandemic when we were having a lot of people who were very stressed, we were isolated, and I was trying to tell my, team from the dean's office, hey, it's okay to take time for yourself. Did you know we have these counseling services for employees, and they're free, and you get 5 free visits a year? So I went through and I was like, let me make sure I'm writing this correctly so our employees know exactly what to do, that they may want to do it. And I was all the way into the sign up, and I thought, well, I'm here, I might as well just sign up. And so I signed up and I got matched with a great person. That team is terrific. I don't know if anybody's used them, but if not, I mean, you don't have to have like, oh, I'm having, a major crisis. but to just have somebody else to talk to that's not your family and not your work colleagues about, well, I don't know how to deal with this, or I've matched with a person that I see about 5 times a year, 4 or 5 times a year on a Zoom session. And it's just wonderful. And every time I see her on my calendar, I'm like, oh, yay, I get to have somebody whose job it is to take care of me, and to tell me that I'm okay. And that's just a really wonderful benefit. So if you guys are not taking advantage of that, please consider it, because it's not, you don't have to have a pressing issue or something that's, that you're really just about, at a tipping point on, just to have somebody to talk to. I will tell you, the one thing she asked me a couple of sessions ago was, what do you do for fun? And I had a hard time answering that question. And she's like, that's a problem. Like, you need to work on that, Jennifer. And I'm like, yes, I do. I mean, she didn't say it that judgmentally. She was, they're very good. So they're just going to say, maybe that's something you could think about. And, what are some things that you could do for fun outside of work? The last thing I would say is that one thing I want to say is to supervisors in particular, is not everybody has to be the same as you. And so sometimes I've got some on my team that are really good about boundaries, and some are not good about boundaries. But that's what works for them. And if they're not expressing anxiety or stress about it, that they derive joy from their work, they derive, that's what they do for fun. Honestly, what I do for fun is I work. I mean, I like to work. I feel like I'm good at it. I feel like I get a lot of enjoyment and satisfaction out of solving problems in the workplace. So that's kind of what I do for fun. And you do have employees like that. And you have other employees that are like, it's my 8 to 5 job. Outside of that, you don't own me. I don't owe you anything, right? And that both of those are legitimate approaches, where you as a supervisor have to say, is if this is causing stress on one way or the other, or causing stress on the team, we need to address it. But that trying to make judgments on, you need to go home and spend time with your kids, that's their choice, right? That if they're happy and things are working for them and they're working really long hours and that's where they find satisfaction, then that's okay. That you can't think that what works for you is going to work for someone else. So that's where I would leave that for supervisors, just to remember, and that it doesn't have to be a comparison. Different styles can work for different folks. So with that, I will wrap up, and I guess we'll turn it over to Craig.
Thank you so much, Dean Greer. There are so many things that you said there that I can relate with. First is, the redundancy part of the structure of the organization. I will say we don't often think of that in work-life terms. We think of it in operational terms, but the illustration that you gave of somebody being sort of maybe afraid or unwilling to unplug themselves for a vacation is really real. And we have some folks in the College of Pharmacy that that are sometimes a little bit nervous about what they're going to come back to. I think, maybe even 1 or 2 of them is on this call. So we're working on that as well. We're better in some areas. We've got a ways to go in some areas for sure. I have also used the counseling service. So and it started during the pandemic. I have a feeling they had a whole lot of new folks during the pandemic. So I will put a plug in there as well. So personally, we try to promote those things, and I try to be relatively open and vulnerable with the folks that report to me. And I have said openly before, I really struggled for a bit of time during the pandemic, and it wasn't necessarily the isolation, or at least that wasn't the part at the top of at the surface. I struggled with, I'm not sure how we're going to get these things done. And I'm not sure how we're going to handle, whether it's the budgetary issues or whether it's the operational issues. So I was really struggling with those things, and it really helped. And obviously having the kids at home while I'm trying to work was a lot of fun too. So, I think we have a lot of similarities for how we try to approach organizationally work-life balance. I will say I view myself sort of in 2 different roles here. One is the folks who directly report to me, and one is how we set the expectation for the college as a whole. I think the most important thing I can do is show compassion to the people who directly report to me, and encourage the rest of our supervisors to do the same. Some days I'm great at that, I think, and some days I'm not so great at that. And I think we have, just like any college with a bunch of different kinds of supervisors, we have a really wide variety of folks who respect boundaries and encourage their folks to take care of themselves. And just being honest, we're not perfect in that area. We have some folks who say, this particular supervisor probably is working me a little bit more than is warranted by my position, and I don't feel great about taking time off and those things. So that's a challenge, and I don't want to convey the message that we have these things all figured out. We're just working through them one at a time. But we address those issues as we come to them. I've gotten all of those examples on the second question. I've gotten all of those requests. And I will say probably the most common is work schedules, whether that's related to taking care of children, kids that need to be dropped off at school, or unique sort of schedules, whether that's taking care of one's parents. It might be that someone needs a little bit of scheduling flexibility because, Mondays are their day to take care of an elderly parent or something like that. I think the important part is the only thing you can really program in from a policy standpoint is flexibility when possible, and everything else has to be taken on a one-on-one basis. And you need to be able to sit down and see that employee that's coming to you as a person. I told some folks, I have told some folks before, my department chair several years ago made a huge difference in my personal growth for how he handled a situation I was having at home. I was the primary caregiver for a grandparent who was nearing the end of his life, and he was in the hospital in Lexington. And, I would miss a day over there, and then, physicians would come in and there'd be an important sort of decision made and I wouldn't be there. And so finally it got to the point where I said, can you help me out? Is there something I can do? And this was before like remote work was sort of normal. And he said, yeah, you've got a laptop, take your laptop, go sit next to him. If you can work there, great. If not, take some time off. I will let you know if, we'll be in touch. I'll let you know if I need you. That compassion that he showed me was something I hadn't really seen before, and it made a huge difference in how I view how I handle those requests now. I think it's important to think about our employees as people first. It's also important to throw away the notion that having a well-fulfilled employee and having a productive employee at work are mutually exclusive propositions. I would posit that one reinforces another, and they're positively correlated, not negatively correlated. And so that's one of the things I've tried to instill in our folks. I kind of view my approach, the most healthy approach to work-life balance is open communication and understanding expectations. So if you just assume that this person understands what they need or what you need from them and their work productivity, then I think you're setting yourself up for failure. Those need to be discussed openly, and clear goals have to be made. Trust. So if you've hired the right person and you've given them clear expectations, then you trust that they get it done. And sometimes, are you going to get burned by trust? Absolutely. Just like in the rest of your life, at some point, someone will burn that trust, and that's going to be a fact of life. And you can deal with that when it happens. That's people will positively surprise you in that most of them will not burn that trust. If you've hired the right person and you trust them, you will be rewarded for that. Verification. Clearly, we have to verify that work is getting done, and we usually do that by check-ins and by clear expectations of when something is going to be delivered. And then the last one I think about for me personally is vulnerability. I've been on the situation where in the past where I might have a supervisor that I think is a superhero, and because no vulnerability is ever shown at work. And I felt like I had to live up to that expectation. And then you get to a point where you're the supervisor or the leader, and you realize that was a mirage, and those people don't really exist. And I want to do my part in making sure that that mirage is not something that people see. I am a very flawed human being, and I have a lot of things that I struggle with on a daily basis. And I'm willing to say those things and say, I don't feel like I've been very productive lately. I haven't been feeling great. And I feel like I've failed at this particular thing, and I got to get better at it. And I think if you're vulnerable with those things, people will see you, number one, as relatable. And number two, as see themselves as able to accomplish some of the things that they're being tasked with. So that sort of leads into how I manage my own work-life efforts. I've been blessed with a couple of recent supervisors that are really supportive. I'm not exactly where I want to be. I would love to be able to say that I can go on vacation and not open my email. I'm probably not there yet. But I am pretty willing to, if I've got to go pick up a kid at school, I will schedule myself around that. I will, if I've got a week coming up with volleyball games for my daughter, I will make sure that if I have things to do in the evenings, that they're not going to be taken up at that during that time frame. So I'm working on that. And I actually think being that example is probably the most important thing you can do relationally for the folks that report to you. It's not, you have to stop thinking about sort of the relationship as transactional and more relational, and that will benefit you both. So I'm going to stop there and let Meg take over.
Thanks, Craig. And I'll also echo everything Jennifer and Craig have already said. Great thoughts. Also, thanks for letting me be on this panel. This is one of my favorite subjects, and I see a lot of friends in the meeting today. So hi to all of you. I was going to take it down to a little bit more of a micro level, because on my team, I either have direct reports, second line reports, or dotted lines to about 30 people. And that's a really big group to kind of keep tabs on and understand where they're at. But to echo what Craig said about building relationships, I feel like from the supervisor standpoint, it's my responsibility and obligation to pay attention, to get to know my team members, to get up and walk around, to learn to be able to read when they're stressed or when they're happy, and be able to tease that out a little bit. Because some people will be very vocal and come to me and tell me what they need, but there are other people who are going to be a little bit more shy about it. And I need to be proactive about offering to them, hey, I see this is going on. Let's talk about some ways that we can, make things good for you. Additionally, I've really gotten away from using the phrase work life, because the more I think about it, the more I'm like this, it's all life, I bring the same Meg to work that I am at home. And I really want to empower my team to do that as well. And so for me, I think of it a lot less about, that seesaw balance, and more about integrating and thinking about, do you have the tools you need to do your job? Yes, but are you getting the breaks that you need? Do you understand different priority levels? Not everything is a number one priority or super urgent. And I think it's really important for me as the manager of workflow to also make it clear to employees when, this actually isn't super high priority. Yes, it needs doing, but you can take your time with things, and you can take time for yourself. I will say that, yes, I get all this life related requests, same as every other supervisor, but I'll just add to that again, I try to be very, very intentional about offering it to team members when I sense that they could really benefit from a mental health day, or sometimes it's as simple as me getting up and saying, it's a beautiful day outside, let's just go take a walk. We're not talking about work, we just need to get some sunshine and take some fresh air, right? And I guess that flows into how I manage my own work-life efforts, is that I'm very, very vocal and open about both what I do for my own self-care, but also what I'm trying to empower other people to do, so that team members know that they have permission, and it's blanket permission. I never lead with the presumption that somebody is going to take advantage of my flexibility or my good intentions. Most of us are going to work at our careers for a very, very long time. And it's absolutely daunting to me if you think about that as being the sole most important thing in your whole existence. And so having that perspective makes it a lot easier to be like, let's take some time off, or don't check your email when you're taking that vacation. And I'll just share one really practical thing that we've done in the last couple of years that's been really beneficial is that when somebody goes on vacation for an extended period, one person will be the collector of the information or questions for that person. And we all make a commitment to leaving that person off email threads, not directing questions to them, to keep their inbox uncluttered. And so, for example, when my supervisor goes on vacation, I'm that person. I compile a list of, everything that they'll need to know that they missed during their time off. And I do not bombard them with it. It doesn't come the first day that they're back. We give a little bit of time to ease in. But I'm always trying to be creative about how we can extend that flexibility as it suits each individual employee, because the needs are so different kind of across the board. And the last thing I'll say is that I try to make space for fun on the clock in our team, that not every single second of every single working day has to be, cranking things out, right? We do better work when we appreciate each other and care about each other. And I think that social time is just very, very important to build those relationships and to build that trust. So I'll stop there, Azetta, and let the questions flow.
All right, thank you so much. I loved all of the introductory comments and just helping us to get an understanding of how you guys approach work life for yourselves and for your teams. I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions that we received in advance. So far, we don't have any questions in the chat, but if you guys are here, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. So as far as our panelists go, you guys, you don't have to answer all of these questions if you don't have an answer for it necessarily, but if you do, feel free to chime in. So here's our first question. How do we balance being supportive of work-life related needs with staff that seem to be taking advantage of flexibility?
I'll jump in on this one, even though I just spoke, because I feel like this is the number one question I get when I talk to people about this issue. And I'll say I don't ever lead with the presumption that people are going to take advantage, because generally they don't. And the test of whether or not I feel like things are being used as they're supposed to, as our tasks getting done, 99.9% of the time, tasks are getting done. When you extend that flexibility, people, really want to make good on it. They know that it's an expression of trust. And so I've had very few occasions where the flexibility has translated into something not getting done or somebody not meeting my expectations. And maybe a side note is that when I extend that flexibility, I expect people to take advantage and not in a negative way. If I extend somebody the opportunity to work from home for a reason, doing the laundry while they're at home working is not taking advantage. That's what I expect them to do. That's why I extended the flexibility, right? And so having that kind of perspective helps to not always frame things as if people are not going to rise to the expectation.
Yeah, I'll just add something really quick there. I think two things come to mind for me. Number one, let's make sure we understand how we're measuring taking advantage of. So if it's somebody's working at a different time or something like that, then I wouldn't consider that taking advantage of at all. I would think they are taking advantage of flexibility, but not taking advantage of you providing the flexibility. And secondly, if in fact the tasks are not getting done, which may occur, I would say go back to the beginning and say we need to have a discussion about what the deliverables are and what the tasks are that need to get done. And always keep in mind that flexibility is only, if you need to get to the point where that person you need to be less flexible for a period of time, for a season, until expectations are more clear, then you can do that as well. So just think about that as you encounter those situations.
I'll just jump in and say this kind of answers the first two questions, obviously, as Craig and Meg just did on that typically what I have seen is the productivity issues are separate than where they're working or what their schedule is. That if somebody could be working a regular schedule in the office and you still have the productivity issues, so they are going to follow that's an issue of productivity and not of a flexibility of schedule or work from home issue. And I think the number one way to deal with that is clear communication of expectations as a supervisor, or the employee who may not know what their expectations are. And so I know one of the folks that that has supervised somebody in our area that had challenges with this actually would just say, tell me what you're doing, what are your goals for today? And just start that basic. I mean, sometimes it could be a week, or if you've got somebody that really needs a whole lot of guidance on getting there, what are you going to do today? And then at the end of the day, what did you get accomplished? And I know that sometimes that seems overly harsh, but if that helps everybody understand, here's what I'm working on, and if we're not meeting the expectations, what are the challenges? What's stopping you from meeting those expectations, and how can I as your supervisor help? So it's not me being micromanaging, it's trying to understand what the sticking points are, and those typically are separate from where they're working or what schedule they're working. That's an expectation and a goal problem with the employee.
All right, thank you. Here's our next question. How do you handle supervising employees who are working from home and have autonomous positions that you may not see work is not getting done? That's a little tricky.
Well, I would say,
I just said I answered both those in my last one.
Yes.
Yeah, correct. Sorry.
I just think, I think if you're not seeing work being done, I think we need to step back and say, why is that? Is it that you're not checking in? Is it that the expectations aren't clear? What is that employee who may be working from home? What's their understanding of what they should be sharing with you? And if it's a regular check-in, then that needs to be regular check-in, and there need to be deliverables outlined at that check-in.
All right, I'm going to go on to the next question. How do I know when it is time to adjust my work-life balance, and what is the first step?
I'm a big believer in this one, and I think a lot about this sounds so negative, I don't want to lead with it, but if you're dreading coming into work in the morning, it's time to reevaluate. If you don't have something to look forward to in your personal/professional life, then it's time to reevaluate, I think. And I think the first step is to ask the people around you what they see as missing for you. What are the gaps? And I mean, your family and your people at home can probably tell you that as much as anybody. But hopefully your colleagues that you spend all your waking hours with also can say, I notice, you're answering emails in the evenings, tell me about something you could do instead. I mean, I love the idea. I love talking to people about their hobbies. So, have you made time for XYZ lately? I think that's really important.
I would say if you are feeling stress or discomfort, that's something that needs to be addressed. And again, that I was sharing a story with folks earlier about in my first role as a professional, when I was in my early 20s, right out of college, I did have somebody, and this is in the early 90s, where they said, well, you just got married, you need to go home and have dinner with your husband. And I was very offended by that statement, because I thought, well, they wouldn't say this man that's working late needs to go have dinner with his wife. Maybe they would have, but it didn't sit well with me. You don't know what I need in my life, as an employee. And so, if I was saying this is causing me stress, I'm not getting my work done, I really would like to have time to go home and have dinner with my husband. That's a time that it needs to be addressed, right? But if I'm enjoying being there, and maybe my husband is working nights as well, right? And so I think that if it's causing you stress, exactly what Meg said, talk to somebody, talk to your supervisor, or at home, if it's causing you stress at home because you're not being able to relax at home, how is your support system at home, friends, family, how can they help you with that? But if it's not causing you stress, I think that's the big thing that I've learned over the course of my lifetime is don't impose my views on what work-life balance should be on others, because what works for each person is different.
I'd also say if you're asking that question, go talk to a counselor and ask them how to help you unpack that, or a good friend, or bounce that off of someone, because I've found that I'm maybe not the last person to know that I'm struggling, but I'm not the first person to know that I'm struggling. So, unpack that with somebody who knows you.
All right, thank you. Here's our next question. As a leader, we often prioritize work-life balance for our employees, but how do we do that for ourselves?
No one's unmuting, so I'll unmute. I mean, this is hard, but I think you have to, you have to understand, as both Meg and Dean Greer have talked about, you have to learn what works for you, and you have to be an example of that to the folks around you at work, especially those who are looking up to you. So if that means that you set boundaries that say, I'm not going to answer email past a certain time in the evening. I love Meg's idea of having someone who gathers all the information while people are away and presents it later on. That's a fantastic idea. Probably something I'm going to try to implement at work. Have somebody do that for you. Make sure you communicate ahead of time when you're going to be off, and just say, look, if you need help with this issue while I'm gone, this is the person you talk to. Please don't, and as long as folks know where to go, they're going to respect those boundaries. It's a challenge, because sometimes I feel like if I'm going to go on vacation, I might punish myself if I'm not paying attention to email while I'm gone, because I'm going to come back and it's going to be overwhelming. But if you set those things up ahead of time, you can have a little bit better chance of success. But this is the hardest part of the whole conversation, is how do I practice it when I speak it.
Yeah, I deliberately didn't answer because I'm not good at that. But I think Craig's example, we did have one of our associate deans that works all the time, took a vacation during spring break. And we were all really good about just not sending her anything, like literally nothing. We're just like, even if it was a group email that we were responding to, we just go in and remove her name, because we wanted to give her that protection. I think the point that Craig made, and Meg's example of who is the person to go to in this absence. And then, sometimes I think as a supervisor, especially, as a dean of a college, when I'm like, oh, I'm going to take my daughter to Costa Rica for a graduation trip, I don't want people to know that, because I think they're going to go, well, that dean gets paid a lot of money. Was she off jetting to Costa Rica? But it was my child who was graduated in 2020 and didn't get a graduation art trip. Right. And so, but I'm not vulnerable enough to share that, because I think there's going to be judgment passed on why is this dean not working. And so, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Meg has a better answer for me.
No, I don't. I wanted to thank you for your authenticity, though, Jennifer. I mean, that's a tough thing to share, I think. And the reason I didn't unmute at first was because, not to brag, but I'm excellent at this. I love work-life balance, but I'm kidding. But really, it just depends on your priorities. And I have a lot of respect for, I have a supervisor personally. We work great together. She lives for work. That's what makes her really happy. That is where she finds her peace. And so for her to be answering emails at 8 o'clock at night, that's what she needs. That's going to make her quality of life good. She also doesn't have the expectation that I'm answering emails at 8 o'clock at night. But she also knows she can contact me if something is truly urgent, and we've got that kind of relationship, and it works. But I think, modeling, what you want your employees to do is maybe a good first step too. And it's funny that you gave that example, Jennifer, because I just took my daughter, who is graduating from high school this year, on a graduation trip to Florida. I told everybody, I was like, we're going to Universal. I'm sending you guys pictures, And so, I want people to feel empowered to go and have those experiences too. And so I think as leaders, and I'm speaking to the folks in the room too, the more that you can do these things and to the extent that you're comfortable, share that you're doing them, I think that really helps your team members feel like, yeah, they've got permission to do it too.
All right, here's our next question. How do I approach the conversation about work-life balance, especially when in a new role or interviewing for a new role?
I'll jump in real quickly on this one because I've been interviewing for a lot of faculty positions. Tenure track faculty positions have been coming to see me in the last couple of weeks, and these are conversations that I like to have from the dean's level with the faculty, so they don't have to ask it to their department chairs or their colleagues that they're interviewing with about, here are the ways that we can stop a tenure clock if we need to. Here's the support that you have, just because it's a little easier sometimes to hear that from someone outside when you're in the middle of a job interview. If it's a young parent who is thinking that they may have another child, that what options are there? And that's a really hard thing to ask in an interview because people are afraid that that might be considered, oh, well, we don't want that. I think we've really changed as a society from the time when I was on the job market in the early 90s, looking for faculty positions of, we don't want to hire this woman because she's of childbearing age, which I think was a real consideration when they were hiring faculty positions at the time. I think we've gotten so far away from that. I think we've made a lot of progress on some of these issues. I do think that it's not a supervisor only problem, that sometimes we can't see what's going on. I was just talking to one of our employees today about another employee who has disclosed that they have a lot of anxiety and stress. And I was like, really? I've never seen that in that person. They just seem so cool and collected and very chill all the time. But the people who are living day to day in the environment have sometimes better solutions than we could ever come up with because they're living it and they can see things that we don't see at our level. So, I think the big thing is, being empowered, that not just coming with a problem, but here's the problem I'm having, here's some ideas that I have, and have a conversation about it instead of saying, here's the problem, can you fix it for me, or where can I go to explore some options that might work for me, and having that safe place. I do think it has to be a conversation. And I will say that I think generationally, I think some of our younger employees have a much better set of boundaries, and I think that's very healthy, that the generation in their 20s are much more vocal about saying, this is what I need, than somebody, I'm in my 50s, right? That it's just, I was socialized differently in the workplace.
All right, thank you. Here's our next question. How do you manage individual needs of employees, but remain fair across everyone on your team?
This comes back to knowing that the needs aren't going to be the same for everybody. And, I think a lot about the fact that I've got a lot of young parents on my team. And, if there's been times where I've gone to them and said, you need like a day, at home, and they're like, no, that's stressful. There's baby clothes everywhere, and or the kid is at home, and no, thank you. So just knowing that everybody is going to be coming at this from a different place. Also, wherever it's appropriate, not without, disclosing people's private circumstances, but to be open about the flexibility that I'm able to extend, or the support that we're extending, so that people know what the variety is. And so they know that it's a safe space to come and ask me that their particular need, that I see, oh, so-and-so, asked for this, and I may need something similar. They just kind of feel empowered to ask that. I also think the inverse of this is really kind of important. We work on a student services team, so we do have programming that takes us into evenings and weekends. And it's really important to me that it's not just, our young single people with no children that are tapped constantly to do this. kind of thing. And so we've come up with a pretty equitable system for making sure that those kinds of responsibilities and obligations are evenly balanced, which I think also builds up the team trust and camaraderie.
I think the primary way you sort of prevent any sort of perceived negativity is you say everyone has the same expectations, and that the job, that the tasks are going to get done. And I'm much less concerned about what time of day or how you get the task done than I am about the tasks getting done. So that's the flexibility I will extend to everyone, as long as we don't, obviously you have some folks who have a time bound, there are some services the university provides that have to be done in person at a certain time. Other than that, where there's flexibility, you just extend that same flexibility to everyone, and make sure everyone understands, as long as they're getting their work done, this same flexibility can be extended to you.
All right, here's our last question. And if you guys if you're still here and you have a question that you want to put in the chat, feel free to do so. How does your team culture and personal work-life experiences influence the support that you offer your team?
I might jump in just really quickly, and this is speaking basically to parents on our team, that, my children are now grown. They are 22 to my oldest daughter is turning 28 today. It's her birthday. So my children are grown. And was I the best mom? No. Was I the best employee during that time? No. But I think I beat myself up a lot about that. When I was younger, it was like I felt like I walked into every room just apologizing, like literally just like, okay, I failed. I mean, from the time I walk in the room, whether it's at home with my kids or being late to the PTA meeting or not having the cookies for the bake sale or whatever it was, or missing a meeting or, not being prepared for class, whatever it was, I was constantly beating myself up. So now being 56, going back to my employees who have young children at home, to say, you know what, it's going to be okay, that you should not beat yourself up. And so I think that's the big lesson, because I will hear the anxiety of people who are younger with younger kids at home trying to balance all of this. And it's like, it's all going to work out. And if I wish I had spent less time beating myself up. And so I try to teach from what I can see now that I could not see then, because I'm on the other side of it.
I think it's really important to have healthy relationships both inside and outside of work, or who you can say, I'm, pretty regularly I'll say, I don't feel like I'm doing anything well right now. I feel like I'm, as Dean Greer said, I feel like that, I've taken on so much, both in my personal life and my professional life, that things are just falling apart. It's good to say that out loud. First of all, if you have to say it to yourself, and then sort of ask yourself, what you would say to someone else if they came to you and said that. And then secondly, again, the vulnerability part, that's what I've learned over my career. I used to think that if I shared that I was having a little bit of difficulty at work, I'd be seen as weaker or somehow less of a strong employee. And I think the opposite is probably more true. I'll come home there'll be a day when my wife comes home, I got tears in my eyes saying, I feel like I'm failing at work and I'm failing at being a dad. And she's like, just step back and let's look at this realistically and see. It's really shaped how I view when other folks feel like they're struggling as well.
Yeah, I was going to kudos to everything Craig and Jennifer have said, because I just agree with it completely. And I think we've all probably had the opposite of these experiences where, you've worked in teams where the culture doesn't feel very positive, or you don't feel empowered or supported to, take care of your whole self. And so to kind of keep that, I never like to keep a negative example in my mind, but I've got them, and so I keep my eyes too on the amazing work that my team does, the productivity that they show, the constant care and compassion they show for students in particular. I really think is a direct result of their own experiences on our team, feeling like they're supported as whole, authentic, unique, individual human beings. So I see a direct line between being a supportive supervisor, being able to support work life, and productivity outcomes in our university's mission. So it's sometimes people are about the bottom line, and I think that we can prove that the bottom line is improved when we support our team in these ways.
Thank you so much to our panelists. As we get ready to close today, did you guys have any final comments that you want to share with our attendees today?
I wasn't terribly prepared with closing comments. That's a failure on my part there. I just think this is we see each other as people, and a lot of other stuff gets a little bit easier. See each other as some sort of transactional relationship, and this whole thing gets a little bit messy. So you start from there. It might be a little sticky occasionally, but if you see the other person and the person who reports to you or works with you as a whole person needing the same sort of things that you do, it gets a lot easier.
I think I'll let Craig's work speak for us, and just thank you guys for asking me to share with you today.
Yep, I'll just say thanks. Craig nailed it. We appreciate all of you.